The night was dark, wind howled outside. Aditya slept soundly in his room. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks echoed in the silence. He woke up with a start. His heart pounded like a drum. He looked around the room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Aditya's room was on the 2nd floor. He stared at the window, a shiver crawling up his spine. The wind rattled the panes, creating eerie sounds. He tried to calm himself down, but deep down, fear gnawed at him. The next morning, Aditya woke up with a jolt. The events of the previous night came flooding back to him. He rushed to Rohan's house, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. But his worst fears were confirmed. Rohan was missing. Aditya couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over him. Determined to find his friend, Aditya decided to start his search by retracing Rohan's last known steps. He went to their usual hangout spots, hoping for any clue that could lead him to Rohan. But everywhere he went, he encountered only dead ends. People had seen Rohan, but no one knew where he had gone or what he had been up to. As Aditya delved deeper into his investigation, he couldn't help but notice the strange atmosphere that had descended upon the town. People spoke in hushed tones, their faces etched with worry and suspicion. Whispers of Rohan's disappearance followed him like shadows. Determined to uncover the truth, Aditya decided to visit Rohan's parents. They were devastated by their son's disappearance and clutched at any shred of hope that Aditya offered. They told him about Rohan's recent fascination with local legends, particularly the one about the abandoned house at the edge of the woods. According to the legend, the house was once home to a family that had vanished without a trace. Rohan, always the adventurous one, had been captivated by the story and had even ventured into the woods a few times to explore the abandoned house. Despite the fear gnawing at his insides, Aditya knew he had to investigate the abandoned house. The woods were dark and silent, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. As Aditya made his way deeper into the woods, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. Finally, he reached the edge of a clearing and saw the abandoned house standing in the middle, like a skeletal finger pointing towards the sky. The windows were boarded up, and the paint peeled off the walls like scabs. A sense of foreboding washed over Aditya as he approached the house, his heart pounding in his chest. Aditya stood frozen, the note trembling in his hand. "You're next!" The words echoed in his mind, sending a shiver down his spine. He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. The woods were silent, except for the rustling of leaves and the chirping of crickets. Aditya returned to town, his mind racing with questions. He needed answers, and he knew just the person who could provide them. Old Man Rahul, the town librarian. Old Man Rahul had lived in the town his entire life and was said to know all its secrets. Aditya found Old Man Rahul sitting at his usual spot behind the library counter, surrounded by stacks of books. He was a frail old man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime's worth of knowledge. Aditya told him about the note, the abandoned house, and the strange feeling of being watched. Old Man Rahul led Aditya to a dusty corner of the library, where a collection of local history books and journals were kept. He pulled out a worn-out leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. This belonged to a young woman who lived in the abandoned house many years ago, he said. Her name was Maya. She kept a detailed account of her life in the house and the strange events that led to her family's disappearance. Aditya's fingers traced the faded ink on the brittle pages. Maya's words painted a chilling picture of the house and the woods. She wrote of strange noises, shadows moving in the night, and a feeling of being constantly watched. Aditya shut the diary, his mind reeling. Maya's words, filled with fear and urgency, resonated deeply within him. The diary was like a cold hand reaching out from the past, pulling him deeper into the mystery surrounding the abandoned house. He looked at Old Man Rahul, his eyes filled with questions. "What happened to Maya and her family?" Aditya asked, his voice barely a whisper. Old Man Rahul sighed, his gaze distant, lost in the memories of a bygone era. Old Man Rahul pulled out a dusty old map from the shelves, its edges frayed and yellowed with time. It was a map of the town and the surrounding area, hand-drawn in faded ink. Aditya leaned in, his eyes scanning the intricate details. "This map belonged to my grandfather," Old Man Rahul explained, his voice low and steady. "He was a surveyor, and he knew these woods like the back of his hand. He marked several points of interest, places he found peculiar." Aditya's gaze fell upon a small circled area on the map, deep within the woods, beyond the abandoned house. It was labeled simply, "The Old Well." Armed with the map and a renewed sense of purpose, Aditya ventured into the woods once more. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows that danced ominously among the trees. The air grew colder as he approached the location of the old well, a palpable chill that seeped into his bones. He found the well hidden amidst a cluster of ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal arms. The well itself was made of crumbling stone, its opening partially concealed by overgrown vines and creepers. A rusted iron bucket lay discarded on the ground nearby, a testament to its long disuse. As Aditya approached the well, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He peered into the well's dark depths, but he could see nothing but inky blackness. Suddenly, he heard a noise from within the well. Aditya stared in horror at his friend, his mind reeling from the shock. Rohan, or whatever had taken his place, emerged from the well, his movements slow and deliberate, like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. His eyes, once filled with warmth and laughter, were now vacant and cold, reflecting an emptiness that chilled Aditya to the bone. "Rohan, what happened to you?" Aditya whispered, his voice trembling with fear and concern. "What is this place?" Rohan's lips curled into a cruel smile, revealing teeth that seemed longer and sharper than before. "This place," he hissed, his voice a raspy whisper that echoed strangely in the stillness of the woods. "This is where it lives. This is where it feeds." Aditya took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for the pocket knife he carried for protection. He needed to get away from this place, to get help. But something held him rooted to the spot, a mixture of fear and the desperate hope that he could somehow save his friend from whatever had taken hold of him. "What are you talking about?" Aditya pressed, his voice strained. "Who is it?" Rohan's smile widened, becoming a grotesque parody of its former self. "You'll find out soon enough," he whispered, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "We've been expecting you." Panic surged through Aditya's veins as he realized the gravity of the situation. He was trapped, alone in the woods with a possessed Rohan and an unknown entity that seemed to hold sway over both of them. He had to escape, to find help, but the path behind him was blocked by his former friend, his eyes blazing with a malevolent light. "Rohan, snap out of it!" Aditya pleaded, his voice echoing through the silent woods. "It's me, Aditya. Don't you recognize me?" But his words seemed to have no effect on Rohan, who continued to advance towards him, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Aditya knew that he couldn't reason with whatever had taken control of his friend. He had to fight back, to create a distraction and make his escape. Thinking fast, Aditya grabbed a nearby rock and hurled it at Rohan, aiming for his head. The rock found its mark, striking Rohan on the forehead with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, momentarily stunned, but the blow didn't seem to faze him for long. Aditya seized the opportunity and sprinted in the opposite direction, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear Rohan's enraged roar behind him, the sound sending chills down his spine. Branches whipped at his face as he ran, his lungs burning with exertion, but he didn't dare slow down. Aditya raced through the undergrowth, his breath catching in his throat, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. The setting sun cast long shadows that danced ominously around him, twisting familiar shapes into menacing apparitions. Fear lent speed to his steps, but he knew he couldn't outrun whatever lurked in the woods forever. He stumbled onto a narrow path, barely visible in the fading light, and surged forward, hoping it would lead him back to safety. The path wound through dense trees, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the frantic beating of his heart. As he rounded a sharp bend, Aditya came to an abrupt halt. Standing in the middle of the path, bathed in a pool of moonlight filtering through the trees, was Old Man Rahul. But there was something different about him, something unsettling in his eyes. A glint of something cold and calculating. Old Man Rahul! Aditya gasped, relief washing over him quickly, replaced by a sense of unease. What are you doing here? We have to get out of here. Rohan, he's not himself. Old Man Rahul smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent shivers down Aditya's spine. Oh, but he is, he said, his voice low and menacing. He's exactly who he's supposed to be. And so are you, Aditya. Aditya stared at him, confusion and fear warring within him. What do you mean? He stammered, taking a step back. Old Man Rahul's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to have lengthened and sharpened, taking on a predatory gleam. I mean, you've played your part perfectly, he said, his voice dripping with malice. And now it's time for the finale. Aditya stared at Old Man Rahul, his mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. The kindly, grandfatherly figure he knew had vanished, replaced by a stranger with eyes as cold and sharp as shards of ice. What are you talking about? Aditya stammered, his voice barely a whisper. What finale? Old Man Rahul chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that echoed through the silent woods. Don't you see, Aditya? He said, stepping closer, his shadow falling over Aditya like a shroud. It was I who lured Rohan to the well. It was I who planted the note, who led you down this path. But why? Aditya choked out, his mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the betrayal. Why would you do such a thing? Why? Old Man Rahul laughed, a harsh, grating sound. For power, of course, he hissed, his eyes blazing with a chilling light. The well, you see, is a conduit to something ancient, something powerful. It grants power to those who know its secrets, who are willing to pay its price. Aditya's blood ran cold as he began to understand. Old Man Rahul, driven by a lust for power, had been using the legends, the disappearances, to manipulate both him and Rohan. He had sacrificed his own grandson to appease the entity dwelling within the well, and now he intended to do the same with Aditya. Rohan trusted you, Aditya whispered, his voice thick with betrayal and disgust. Trust, Old Man Rahul scoffed. Sentimentality is a weakness, a luxury I can no longer afford. The entity demands a sacrifice, a life force to sustain its power. Rohan served his purpose, and now you will serve yours. He gestured towards the well, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The midnight's whisper awaits, Aditya. It hungers for your soul. Aditya knew he couldn't fight Old Man Rahul head-on. The old man was clearly under the influence of a power far beyond his comprehension. He had to find a way to escape, to break free from this nightmare and expose the truth. You're insane! Aditya spat, his mind racing, searching for a way out. You've let this power corrupt you, twist you into something monstrous. Perhaps, Old Man Rahul conceded, his voice echoing strangely in the stillness of the woods. But power is its own reward, a taste I can no longer live without. He lunged then, his frail body moving with unnatural speed, his hands reaching for Aditya's throat. Aditya dodged instinctively, scrambling backward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get to the well, to use it somehow against Old Man Rahul, to disrupt the connection, the hold the entity had over him. But the old man was relentless. his movements fueled by a desperate hunger for power. As Aditya stumbled backward, his foot caught on a gnarled root, sending him sprawling to the ground. He looked up to see Old Man Rahul standing over him, his face contorted in a mask of triumph, his eyes blazing with a terrifying light. "It's over, Aditya!" Old Man Rahul hissed, his voice a guttural rasp. "The Midnight's whisper claims another soul!" Aditya closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. He could hear the whisper now, a cold, insidious voice slithering into his mind, promising power, whispering secrets. He felt himself being dragged towards the well, the darkness closing in around him, a chilling premonition of a fate worse than death.